The pieces started falling into place. Peterson had been my liaison with the CIA for the Kazakhstan operation. If someone had filled in for him at the last minute, it was possible that person had seen me and learned my operational identity, but hadn't been properly briefed on the compartmentalization protocols. Even if that's true, I said slowly, how do you know my real name? She smiled grimly. Because I'm very good at my job, Director. And after that briefing, I was curious about the woman who developed the predictive model that saved so many lives. It took me 6 months to trace Sarah Phillips back to Sarah Chen. And you've told no one about this. Are you kidding? I value my security clearance. But I've been watching your work for 2 years. The Mumbai incident, the situation in Berlin, and the trade summit in Singapore. Your fingerprints are on every major crisis that's been averted in the past 5 years. I felt exposed and vulnerable in a way I hadn't experienced since my training days. Why are you telling me this now? Her expression darkened. Because I think tonight's attack was specifically designed to draw you out. Someone knows about your dual identity, Director. And they're using it against you. Agent Torres's words echoed in my head as I paced the small hospital room. If someone had discovered my real identity and was using it to manipulate me, then my entire operation was compromised. Worse, my family could be in danger. Walk me through tonight, I said, pulling up a chair beside her bed. From the beginning. She closed her eyes as if trying to replay the events in her mind. I was attending a briefing on recent intelligence regarding domestic terrorism threats. Small group, maybe 20 people. A mix of FBI, CIA, NSA, and some people I didn't recognize. People you didn't recognize? That's not unusual. Lots of agencies have liaison officers who work undercover. But there was something off about this group. They were asking very specific questions about recent operations, things that should have been compartmentalized. My pulse quickened. What kind of operations? The kind that would have crossed your desk. The Mumbai incident, the Berlin situation, the Singapore summit. Every major crisis intervention from the past 2 years. A chill ran down my spine. Someone was systematically investigating my operations, possibly trying to reverse engineer my identity. Who called the meeting? That's where it gets interesting. The invitation came through official channels, but when I tried to verify it afterward, no one could tell me who had authorized it. Ghost authorization, I murmured. It was a technique I'd seen used by foreign intelligence services, creating legitimate-looking paperwork that would pass initial scrutiny but couldn't be traced back to its source. Exactly. And the location was changed at the last minute. We were supposed to meet at the Federal Building, but 2 hours before the meeting, everyone got a text saying it had been moved to the Marriott. Why the Marriott? Supposedly because of a security concern at the Federal Building. But I checked, there was no security concern. The building was operating normally. The pattern was becoming clear. Someone had lured a group of federal agents to a secondary location and then orchestrated an attack. But the attack itself seemed almost secondary to the real purpose. Torres, I need you to think carefully. During the meeting, did anyone mention me specifically? Either as Director Phillips or Sarah Chen? She was quiet for a long moment. Not directly. However, there was a question about the predictive modeling system that had been used in recent operations. Someone asked if we knew who had developed it. And most people didn't know. But one of the NSA guys mentioned that he'd heard it was someone from an unnamed department, someone who was supposedly a rising star in crisis management. My blood ran cold. Did he say anything else? He said he'd tried to look into it, but the information was classified beyond his clearance level. Then he made a joke about how the person was probably some MIT graduate who thought they were smarter than everyone else. MIT. That was too specific to be a coincidence. Someone was tracking my background, my education, and my path into the agency. Torres. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded. Did you tell anyone about your research into my identity? Anyone at all? Her face went pale. Oh God. Sarah, I think I may have made a terrible mistake. 3 weeks ago, Torres continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I was approached by someone from Internal Affairs. They said they were conducting a routine security review of compartmentalized operations, and they needed to verify some personnel records. My heart sank. Internal Affairs reviews were real, but they followed strict protocols. Legitimate reviews didn't involve casual conversations with CIA analysts. What did you tell them? I mentioned that I'd noticed some inconsistencies in the personnel files for recent operations. That there seemed to be a phantom director who was referenced in mission reports but didn't appear in any official directories. Did you mention my name? She closed her eyes. Not directly. But I said I'd been curious about the identity of the person who developed the predictive modeling system and that I'd done some research. What kind of research? I told them I'd traced some of the operational signatures back to academic work done at MIT, and that I'd identified a few potential candidates based on their areas of expertise. This was worse than I'd thought. If someone in Internal Affairs was actively investigating my identity, it meant the compromise went to the highest levels of the intelligence community. Did they ask you to continue your research? They said they might contact me again if they needed additional information. But Sarah, I swear I didn't give them your name. I didn't even know for certain that you were the same person until tonight. I believed her. Torres struck me as someone who took operational security seriously. But the damage was already done. Someone now knew that an MIT graduate with expertise in predictive modeling was running covert operations under a false identity. Torres, I need to ask you something else. The person from Internal Affairs, did they give you a name? Agent Davidson. I looked him up afterward, and he checked out. 15 years with the Bureau, currently assigned to the Internal Affairs Division. I pulled out my phone and sent a coded message to my operations center. Within minutes, I had a response that made my blood run cold. What is it? Torres asked, seeing my expression. Agent Davidson died in a car accident 2 weeks ago. My phone buzzed with an encrypted message from my operations center, critical alert, unauthorized access detected, recommend immediate extraction. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. If my cover were blown, my family could be in immediate danger. My apartment was compromised. My entire life was compromised. Torres, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to do it without asking questions. She nodded, though I could see the fear in her eyes. I'm going to give you a phone number. If anything happens to me, if I disappear, if I'm arrested, if I die, you call that number and you tell them exactly what you told me tonight. I wrote down the number for Deputy Director Harrison, my direct supervisor, and one of only 3 people who knew both of my identities. What are you going to do? I'm going to find out who's hunting me, and I'm going to stop them. But first, I had to get to my family. I left Torres at the hospital and drove through the night toward my parents' house in Bethesda. My mind was spinning with possibilities. If someone had discovered my identity, they would know about my family. They would know that Sarah Chen, the disappointment, was the daughter of 2 prominent physicians. They would know how to find me. My parents' house was dark when I arrived at 5:30 a.m. I parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using the surveillance techniques I'd learned during my training. Everything looked normal, but normal was exactly what I'd expect from professionals. I let myself in through the back door, using the key I'd had since high school. The house was quiet, but I could hear my father's snoring from the master bedroom. I crept upstairs, my heart pounding. They were safe for now, but as I was about to leave, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. There was a small device attached to the back of my father's bedside phone, a listening device so sophisticated that most people wouldn't recognize it. Someone was already watching my family. I photographed the listening device and sent the image. to my tech team, then carefully removed it and slipped it into my pocket. If someone were monitoring my family, they would notice when the device went offline. I had maybe an hour before they realized it had been discovered. I drove to a secure location, a safe house in Alexandria that officially didn't exist, and activated the emergency protocols. Within minutes, I was on a secure conference call with Deputy Director Harrison and Assistant Director Walsh, the only two people in the agency who knew my real identity. "Sarah, what's your status?" Harrison's voice was crisp and professional. "Compromised. Someone's been investigating my identity for months, possibly years. They've identified the connection between my academic background and my operational work." "How compromised?" "They've been monitoring my family. Professional surveillance, sophisticated equipment." There was a pause. "We need to extract you immediately. New identity, new location, new life." "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended. "I'm not running. I'm not abandoning my family, and I'm not giving up 15 years of work because someone got too close." "Sarah, you're not thinking clearly. If your cover is blown, then we need to find out who blew it and why. This isn't random. Someone went to enormous effort to identify me, and they're not doing it for fun. They want something." "What do you propose?" "I propose we find out what they want. And then we give it to them." "That's not how this works, Sarah. We don't negotiate with hostile forces. We do if it means protecting the operation and the people I care about." Assistant Director Walsh spoke for the first time. "Sarah, we've been monitoring some unusual activity in the intelligence networks. Multiple agencies have been receiving requests for information about compartmentalized operations. Someone's been very systematically trying to piece together the organizational structure of covert operations." "Any idea who?" "We have some theories. But Sarah, you need to understand, if someone's been tracking you this long, this carefully, they're not going to stop just because you go underground. They'll find you eventually. Then we need to end this. Now." "How?" I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to suggest would either save my career or end it forever. I remembered. I'd needed to establish my civilian identity, and David had helped me navigate some of the bureaucracy. "I was curious about the company you were working for. So I did some research. The company existed, but it was essentially a shell. No real employees, no real contracts, no real business." "And you didn't think to ask me about it?" "I did ask. You gave me some story about classified government contracts, and I figured you were working for the CIA or something. But then I started paying attention to the news, and I started noticing patterns." "What kind of patterns?" "We're going to use me as bait." The plan was insane, but it was the only option that didn't involve running for the rest of my life. We would leak information, suggesting that Director Phillips was going to be at a specific location at a specific time. Then wait to see who showed up, but first, I had one more thing to do. I drove to my parents' house that evening, arriving just as my family was sitting down for dinner. My mother looked surprised to see me. I rarely showed up unannounced. "Sarah, what are you doing here? Is everything all right? I need to talk to all of you together." My father gestured to an empty chair. "Sit down. Have some dinner." I remained standing. "Mom, Dad, Linda, David, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago." My mother's face immediately shifted to concern. "Are you in trouble? Are you sick?" "I'm not in trouble, and I'm not sick. But I haven't been completely honest with you about my work." David leaned back in his chair, a smug expression on his face. "Finally ready to admit you don't have a job?" "David, I have a job. I've had the same job for 15 years. I just can't tell you what it is." "More mystery consultant work?" Linda asked, but her tone was gentler than David's. "I work for the federal government. I can't tell you which agency, and I can't tell you what I do, but I can tell you that I'm very good at it." My father frowned. Sarah, if you work for the government, why all the secrecy? Why not just tell us you're a civil servant? Because the work I do is classified. Because if the wrong people knew what I did, they could use that information to hurt people. To hurt you. The room fell silent. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. Sarah, are you in danger? Possibly. That's why I need to tell you this now. There's a chance that over the next few days, you might see things in the news about me. Things that don't make sense, things that seem to contradict everything you know about who I am. What kind of things? David asked, his smugness replaced by concern. I can't tell you specifically. But I need you to know that no matter what you see or hear, I'm one of the good guys. I've spent my entire adult life trying to keep people safe, trying to prevent bad things from happening. My mother squeezed my hand. Sarah, we may not understand what you do, but we've always known you were special. We've always known you were capable of more than we could see. Have you? I looked around the table at my family. Because for years, you've treated me like I was a failure. Like I was the disappointment who couldn't get her life together. My father's expression softened. Sarah, we never thought you were a failure. We thought you were lost. We thought you had so much potential that wasn't being used. It was being used. Just not in a way I could share with you. Linda reached across the table and touched my arm. Sarah, whatever you do, wherever you work, we're proud of you. We've always been proud of you. I felt tears I hadn't expected gathering in my eyes. I need you to remember that. No matter what happens in the next few days, I need you to remember that I love you, and everything I've done has been to protect people. To protect you. Sarah, you're scaring us, my mother said softly. I know. But I need you to trust me. And I need you to be very careful for the next few days. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't talk to any strangers. Don't answer questions about me from anyone, no matter how official they seem. Should we call the police? No. If you're in real danger, people will find you. People who know how to help. You. I stood up, knowing that this might be the last normal conversation I'd have with my family for a very long time. I have to go now. But I want you to know that everything I've done, everything I've achieved, has been to make you proud. Even if you couldn't see it. The trap was set for the next evening. We'd leaked information through 3 different channels, suggesting that Director Phillips would be meeting with foreign intelligence contacts at a warehouse in Southeast DC. It was the kind of meeting that would be irresistible to anyone trying. To identify her, I arrived at the warehouse 2 hours early, along with a team of 12 agents positioned throughout the building and the surrounding area. If someone wanted to find me, they were going to get their chance at 9:47 p.m. 3 black sedans pulled up to the warehouse. Professional operation, coordinated timing, and expensive equipment. Whoever was behind this had serious resources. I watched through a concealed camera as 6 individuals entered the building. I recognized 2 of them immediately, Agent Martinez from the FBI, and a woman I'd seen at several high-level briefings, whom I'd assumed was NSA, but the third person made my blood run cold. It was my brother David. Director Chen, Harrison's voice crackled through my earpiece. We have a problem. I see it, I whispered. How is my brother involved in this? We're not sure. But Sarah, we need to extract you now. This is too dangerous. No. I need to know what's happening. I activated the listening devices we'd planted throughout the warehouse and heard David's voice clearly for the first time. She's here somewhere. Sarah's always been predictable when she's backed into a corner. You're sure this is the right location? Martinez asked. I'm sure. I've been tracking her movements for months. This is exactly the kind of trap she'd set. My mind reeled. My brother had been tracking me. My brother was working with the people who'd been investigating my identity. Judge Chen, the woman said, we appreciate your cooperation in this matter. But we need to be clear about the parameters of this operation. Judge Chen. My brother was a federal judge, but he was also apparently involved in a conspiracy to expose my identity. The parameters are simple, David replied. We expose my sister's dual identity, prove that she's been operating without proper oversight, and use that evidence to restructure the entire covert operations program. And if she refuses to cooperate, then we make her cooperation irrelevant. I'd heard enough. I activated my emergency beacon and prepared to move, but as I was about to leave my concealed position, I heard something that stopped me cold. David. Are you certain about your sister's involvement? Martinez asked. Because if we're wrong about this, if Sarah Chen isn't Director Phillips, then we've blown a major operation for nothing. I'm certain, David replied. I've known for 2 years. Asterisk, how long have you known? I asked, stepping out of the shadows. The 6 people in the warehouse spun around, hands moving toward weapons. But I kept my hands visible and my voice calm. Hello, David. My brother stared at me for a long moment, and I saw a mixture of emotions cross his face: surprise, guilt, and something that might have been pride. Sarah. I was wondering when you'd show yourself. Answer my question. How long have you known? He sighed. Remember when you were 28, and you said you were going to work for a consulting firm? You asked me to help you with some legal documents, insurance paperwork, that kind of thing. Every time there was a major international incident that got resolved quietly, you'd disappear for a few days. Every time there was a terrorist attack that got prevented, you'd come back from a business trip looking exhausted. Martinez stepped forward. Judge Chen, we need to shut up, Martinez, David said without taking his eyes off me. Sarah, I've spent 2 years trying to figure out exactly what you do and who you work for. I know you're Director Phillips. I know you run a covert operations unit. I know you've been instrumental in preventing dozens of major incidents. Then why are you here? Why are you working with these people to expose me? Because I'm worried. About you. Because what you're doing is dangerous, and it's unsustainable, and it's going to get you killed. The warehouse fell silent. I stared at my brother, trying to process what he'd just said. David, you orchestrated this entire operation because you're worried about me. I orchestrated this operation because I'm trying to save your life. Sarah, you're running the most important covert operations unit in the federal government, and you're doing it with no oversight, no accountability, and no backup plan. If something happens to you, if you're killed or captured or compromised, the entire program collapses. That's not your decision to make. It is when you're my sister and you're too stubborn to see that you're in over your head. I looked around. The warehouse at the other 5 people. And them? What's their role in this? Martinez is FBI Internal Affairs. He's been investigating reports of unauthorized covert operations for the past year. Dr. Reynolds is an NSA, and she's been tracking intelligence patterns that don't match any known operations. Agent Foster is CIA, and he's been trying to figure out who's been running operations in his territory without his knowledge. And the other 2. Thompson is from the Inspector General's office, and Williams is from the Government Accountability Office. Sarah, you're not just operating without oversight, you're operating in violation of about 40 different federal laws. My heart sank. So this is an arrest. This is an intervention. Sarah, Martinez said, we're not here to arrest you. We're here to offer you a choice. What kind of choice? You can continue operating as you have been, but with proper oversight and accountability. Or you can be exposed, investigated, and possibly prosecuted for operating outside the law. That's not much of a choice. It's the choice we have, David said. Sarah, what you've been doing is incredible. The lives you've saved, the crises you've prevented, it's the most important work being done in the federal government. But it can't continue the way it has been. Dr. Reynolds stepped forward. Director Chen, we've been studying your operational patterns for months. Your success rate is unprecedented. Your methods are innovative. Your results are remarkable. But you're operating in a legal gray area that puts you, your team, and the entire intelligence community at risk. If Congress finds out about your operations, if the media gets hold of this story, it could destroy the entire covert operations program. So what are you proposing? Thompson, the Inspector General representative, opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick document. We're proposing a new framework. A legal structure that would allow you to continue your work while providing the oversight and accountability that Congress requires. And if I refuse? Then this conversation never happened, Williams said. You go back to your life, and we go back to our jobs. But Sarah, you need to understand, we're not the only ones who've been tracking you. There are hostile forces, foreign intelligence services, and criminal organizations who are also trying to figure out who you are. And if they succeed, then you're dead, David said bluntly. And so is everyone you care about. I looked around the warehouse at these 6 people who'd spent months tracking me, investigating me, trying to understand what I did and how I did it. And I realized that they weren't my enemies, they were my lifeline. What would this new framework look like? Martinez pulled out a second document. You would continue to operate as Director Phillips, but under the official oversight of a joint task force representing the FBI, CIA, NSA, and the Inspector General's office. Your operations would be reviewed, but not micromanaged. Your methods would be studied, but not constrained. And my family would be protected under the same classification protocols that protect your current identity, Dr. Reynolds said. But they would also be protected by the full resources of the federal government. My team would be officially recognized and properly compensated for their work. I looked at David. And you? What's your role in all of this? I'm the judicial oversight. Someone needs to make sure that what you're doing is legal, and that if it's not legal, it's at least constitutional. You want to be my babysitter? I want to be your brother. And I want to make sure you don't get yourself killed saving the world. I took the documents and spent 3 hours reading through them. The proposed framework was comprehensive, thorough, and surprisingly respectful of my operational methods. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. More importantly, it was legitimate. I have conditions, I said finally. What conditions? Martinez asked. My team stays intact. No transfers, no reassignments, no changes to the operational structure. Agreed. My family's protection is non-negotiable. If anything happens to them, because of my work, I walk away from everything. Agreed. And I want to know everything about who else has been tracking me. If there are other people, other organizations, other threats, I want to know about them. Thompson opened another file. We've identified at least 3 foreign intelligence services that have been trying to identify you. 2 criminal organizations that have been tracking your operational patterns. And at least 1 domestic terrorist group that has been trying to figure out who's been disrupting their operations. Any immediate threats? The domestic terrorist group is the most concerning. They've been planning something big and they think you're the primary obstacle to their success. What kind of operation? We're not entirely sure. But they've been stockpiling resources, recruiting personnel, and conducting surveillance on multiple high-value targets. Including me. Including your entire family. My blood ran cold. For how long? At least 6 months. Possibly longer. I looked around the warehouse at these 6 people who'd been hunting me and realized that they might have saved my life by finding me first. All right, I said. I accept your proposal. But I want this terrorist group neutralized before we make any of this official. Sarah, David said, that's not how this works. You can't just, yes, I can. That's exactly what I do, David. I identify threats and I neutralize them. And right now, the biggest threat is a group of domestic terrorists who've been watching my family for 6 months. Martinez nodded. We can work with that. But it has to be a joint operation. FBI, CIA, NSA, and your people, all working together. Fine. But I run the operation. Agreed. The next 48 hours were a blur of intelligence gathering, operational planning, and careful coordination between agencies that rarely worked together. My team from the Classified Operations Unit was officially introduced to their counterparts from other agencies, and I watched as professional respect developed between people who'd been working toward the same goals without knowing it. The domestic terrorist group called itself the Constitutional Restoration Movement, which was about as ominous as it sounded. They were a collection of former military personnel, disgruntled intelligence operatives, and radicalized civilians who believed that the federal government had become too powerful and needed to be reset. Their plan was sophisticated and terrifying: simultaneous attacks on federal buildings in 12 major cities, timed to coincide with a major national holiday when security would be at its lowest. The goal was to create enough chaos and confusion to justify declaring martial law, which would then be used to suspend constitutional protections and install what they called a transitional government. How many people are we talking about? I asked during our final briefing. At least 200 active participants, Agent Foster reported. Possibly as many as 500 if you count support personnel and sympathizers. Weapons. Military grade. Explosives, automatic weapons, communications equipment, even some vehicles that appear to have been stolen from military bases. Funding. That's where it gets interesting, Dr. Reynolds said. The money trail leads back to several offshore accounts, but the ultimate source appears to be domestic. Someone with serious resources has been bankrolling this operation. Any idea who? We have some theories, but nothing definitive. I studied the operational plan we'd developed. It was complex, involving simultaneous raids in multiple cities, careful coordination with local law enforcement, and extensive media management to prevent panic. What's our timeline? They're planning to move in 72 hours, Martinez said. 4th of July weekend. Of course. Nothing said patriotic terrorism like trying to destroy the country on Independence Day, July 4th, 6 a.m. 12 cities. 200 federal agents, and one chance to prevent the largest domestic terrorist attack in American history. I was positioned at the command center in D.C., coordinating operations across the country while my team managed the technical aspects of the raids. David was with me, serving as legal counsel and making sure everything we did would hold up in court. Boston team, report, I said into my headset. Warehouse secured. 17 suspects in custody, weapons cache secured. Chicago team. Building cleared. 23 suspects are in custody. Found enough explosives to level a city block. One by one, the reports came in. Los Angeles, secure. Phoenix, secure. Denver, secure. The raids were going better than we'd hoped, but then came the report I'd been dreading. D.C. team, we have a problem. What kind of problem? The target location is empty. No suspects, no weapons, no evidence. It looks like they cleared out hours ago. My heart sank. How many suspects were you expecting? 37. 37 terrorists, heavily armed and with a specific plan to attack federal targets, were missing from the largest coordinated raid in recent history. All teams, be advised that we have 37 suspects unaccounted for in the D.C. area. Assume they're aware of the raids and have activated contingency plans. Sarah, David said quietly, if they know about the raids, they know about us. I know. They know where we are. Before I could respond, the lights in the command center went out, emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the command center in an eerie red glow. I could hear my team moving to defensive positions, their training taking over even in the chaos. Status report, I called out. Communications are down, my tech specialist, Agent Chen, no relation, reported. Someone's jamming our signals. Local communications only. Everything. Cell phones, radios, internet. We're completely cut off. David grabbed my arm. Sarah, we need to evacuate. No. If we leave, we lose coordination with the other raids. 37 terrorists are still out there, and without central command, the other teams are operating blind. If we stay, we die. If we leave, hundreds of people die. The building shook as something exploded outside. Not close enough to cause structural damage, but close enough to make everyone's ears ring. They're testing our defenses, Agent Foster said, his CIA training evident in his calm analysis of the situation. That was a distraction, not an attack. How do you know? Because if they wanted to bring down this building, they would have done it already. They're trying to force us out. Why? Because they want something from us. Information, access codes. Something. Another explosion, closer this time. The building's fire alarms began wailing, adding to the chaos. Sarah, Dr. Reynolds said, we need to consider the possibility that this is a coordinated attack specifically designed to capture you. What do you mean? Think about it. They've been tracking you for months. They know your operational patterns and your decision-making process. They know you won't abandon an operation to save yourself. She was right. This entire situation was designed to put me in an impossible position, stay and risk capture, or leave and risk the failure of the operation. So what do you suggest? We give them what they want. Which is you. Not, David said immediately. Sarah, you are not walking out there to be captured by terrorists. It's not about what I want, David. It's about what works. Sarah, Martinez interjected, even if you surrender yourself, there's no guarantee they'll let the rest of us go. And there's no guarantee they'll call off whatever attacks they have planned. But it buys us time, I said. Time for the other teams to complete their raids, time for backup to arrive, time for someone to figure out how to stop this. Agent Foster was studying building schematics on a tablet that was somehow still working. There might be another option. What kind of option? This building has a secondary command center 2 floors down. It's designed to operate independently if the main center is compromised. Can we access it? Not easily. We'd have to go through areas that are probably under surveillance, and we'd have to do it without being detected. How many people? Small team. 3, maybe 4 people maximum. I looked around the room at the 12 federal agents who'd been hunting me for months and were now risking their lives to protect me. I'll go, I said. Foster, you're with me. Reynolds, you too. Everyone else stays here and maintains the illusion that we're all still in the main command center. Sarah, David said, I'm coming with you. No, you're not. You're a federal judge, not a field operative. I'm your brother, and I'm not letting you do this alone. David and Sarah, for 15 years I've watched you take risks that terrified me. For 15 years, I've worried that you were going to get yourself killed trying to save people who don't even know you exist. I'm not watching from the sidelines anymore. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the smug federal judge who'd always made me feel like a failure, but the little brother who'd always worried about his big sister. All right. But you follow my lead, and you do exactly what I tell you. Agreed. Moving through a building under siege while trying to avoid detection is harder than it looks in movies. Every step had to be calculated, every sound minimized, and every movement coordinated that we made it to the stairwell without incident, but I could hear voices on the floors above us. The terrorists were systematically searching the building. How much time do we have? Reynolds whispered. Not much, I replied. They'll figure out we're not in the main command center soon enough. We reached the secondary command center, and Foster began working on the access controls while I established communication with the other raid teams. All teams, this is Director Chen. Report status. Boston team, all suspects in custody, no casualties. Chicago team, suspects in custody, minor injuries to 2 agents. Los Angeles team, suspects in custody, weapons cache secured. One by one, the reports came in. The raids had been successful, except for the 37 terrorists who were currently hunting us. David, I said, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to call Mom and Dad. Tell them to leave the house immediately. Tell them to go somewhere safe and stay there until this is over. Sarah, they're protected. We have agents watching them. Those agents are good, but these terrorists have been watching our family for months. They know our security protocols. David pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. Communications are still jammed. Then we need to end this quickly. Foster looked up from the computer terminal he'd been working on. I've got good news and bad news. Good news first. I've re-established communication with federal law enforcement. Backup is en route, ETA 20 minutes. Bad news. The terrorists aren't just trying to capture you. They're trying to access the classified databases through this building's computer systems. What kind of databases? Everything. Personnel files, operational records, and classified mission reports. If they get access, they'll have the identities and locations of every covert operative in the federal government. My blood ran cold. How close are they to getting access? Too close. They've been trying to hack the system for the past hour. And they're using sophisticated techniques. Can you stop them? Maybe. But I'd need to physically access the main server room, and that's on the floor they're currently searching. Then that's what we do. Sarah, Reynolds said, that's suicide. There are at least 37 hostile operators between us and that server room. Then we better be smarter than they are. The plan was insane, but it was the only option we had. While Foster and Reynolds worked to establish better communication with the incoming backup, David and I would create a distraction that would draw the terrorists away from the server room. What kind of distraction? David asked. The kind that makes them think they've found what they're looking for. I pulled out my official identification as Director Phillips and handed it to him. You're going to surrender yourself as me. Sarah. No. Not. David, you're a federal judge. You have the authority and the knowledge to make this work. You tell them you're willing to trade yourself for the safety of the other people in the building. And when they figure out I'm not Director Phillips, by then, Foster will have secured the servers, the backup will have arrived, and this will be over. What if the backup doesn't arrive in time? Then we improvise. David stared at me for a long moment. Sarah, I've spent 2 years trying to protect you from exactly this kind of situation. I know. But right now, I need you to trust me. I do trust you. That's what scares me. He took the identification and headed toward the main stairwell. I watched him go, knowing that I was sending my brother into danger to save people he'd never met, but that's what we did in this job. We made impossible choices to protect people who didn't even know they needed protecting. 20 minutes later, I heard David's voice echoing through the building's public address system. This is Director Sarah Phillips. I'm willing to discuss terms for the peaceful resolution of this situation. The kind that has a vested interest in destabilizing the American government. My mind raced through the possibilities. Foreign intelligence services are funding domestic terrorists, using their knowledge of my identity and operational patterns to create a distraction that would allow them to attack critical infrastructure. Martinez, I need you to contact the directors of the FBI, CIA, and NSA immediately. Tell them we have a coordinated attack in progress, foreign-funded, targeting multiple federal facilities. What's our priority target? I thought about it for a moment, trying to think like the people who'd been tracking me for months. What would be the most devastating target? What would cause the most chaos and confusion? The Federal Reserve, I said. If you want to destabilize the American government, you attack the financial system. But the Federal Reserve has excellent security. Not if you've been planning this attack for years. Not if you've been systematically identifying and eliminating the people who would normally respond to this kind of threat. David looked up from his tablet. Sarah, what are you saying? I'm saying this entire operation, tracking me, identifying my team, forcing us into this situation, it was all designed to neutralize the one unit that would be most effective at stopping whatever they're planning. Your unit. My unit. We raced through the streets of D.C., sirens wailing, while I coordinated with multiple federal agencies to mount a defense of the Federal Reserve Building. But I had a sinking feeling that we were already too late. The Federal Reserve Building was in chaos when we arrived. Security guards were evacuating personnel, federal agents were establishing a perimeter, and somewhere inside the building, an unknown number of hostile operatives were attempting to access the most sensitive financial systems in the world. Status. Report, I demanded as we approached the incident commander. An unknown number of suspects are inside the building. They've taken control of the security systems and locked down the building. We can't get in, and the people inside can't get out. Casualties. Unknown. But they've made demands. What kind of demands? The incident commander handed me a tablet with a video message. The face on the screen was familiar, it was the terrorist leader from the warehouse, the one who'd been hunting me for months. Director Sarah Phillips, he said, looking directly into the camera, you've been an impressive adversary. But this operation was never about capturing you. It was about forcing you to make an impossible choice. What choice? I asked the screen, though I knew he couldn't hear me as if reading my mind, he continued, you can attempt to stop us from accessing the Federal Reserve's computer systems, in which case we will execute every hostage in this building. Or you can allow us to complete our mission, in which case we will release the hostages and disappear. What's their mission? David asked. The terrorist leader answered that question too. We're going to transfer every dollar in the Federal Reserve's custody to accounts controlled by foreign governments that are hostile to the United States. We're going to crash the American economy, destabilize the dollar, and create the kind of chaos that will allow more reasonable people to take control. How much money are we talking about? Martinez asked. Foster, who'd been consulting with Federal Reserve officials, looked up with a pale face. Approximately $2.3 trillion. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. $2.3 trillion was enough to fund multiple wars, destabilize entire regions, or purchase the loyalty of governments around the world. How long do we have? I asked. They need about 2 hours to transfer that amount of money through international banking systems, Foster replied. But they've already been working for 45 minutes. So we have 75 minutes to stop them. Sarah, David said quietly, there are innocent people in that building. If we try to stop this operation, people will die. If we don't try to stop this operation, the entire American economy could collapse. It was the impossible choice the terrorist leader had promised, save the hostages or save the country, but I hadn't spent 15 years in covert operations by accepting impossible choices. Martinez, I need a complete layout of the Federal Reserve Building. Reynolds, I need technical specifications for their computer systems. Foster, I need communication with whoever's running their IT security. Sarah, David said, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that we're going to save the hostages and stop the money transfer. How? By giving them exactly what they think they want. The plan was complex, dangerous, and depended on split-second timing. But it was the only option that didn't involve choosing between American lives and American financial security. Foster had identified a weakness in the Federal Reserve's security system, a maintenance access point that the terrorists probably didn't know about. It would allow a small team to enter the building without triggering the alarms that the terrorists were monitoring. The access point leads to the building's mechanical systems, Foster explained. From there, you can reach the main computer center without going through any of the areas the terrorists are controlling. What about the hostages? They're being held on the third floor, in the main conference room. The computer systems they're trying to access are in the basement. So we need to simultaneously rescue the hostages and secure the computer systems, while avoiding detection by an unknown number of heavily armed terrorists who've been planning this operation for months. Right. I looked around at my team, federal agents who'd spent months hunting me and were now risking their lives to help me. David, the brother who'd worried about me for years and was now volunteering to walk into danger beside me. And Martinez. Reynolds, Foster, and Thompson were career federal employees who could have chosen other jobs but instead chose to serve their country. All right, I said. Here's how we're going to do this. 30 minutes later, David and I were crawling through maintenance tunnels beneath the Federal Reserve Building while Martinez led a team to create a distraction at the main entrance. The plan was for the distraction to draw the terrorists' attention away from the computer systems long enough for me to access them and reverse whatever they'd already done. Sarah, David whispered as we navigated through a maze of pipes and electrical conduits, I need to tell you something. What? I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. Even when I didn't understand what you were doing, even when I was worried about the risks you were taking, I was proud. David, if this is your way of saying goodbye, it's not. It's my way of saying that I finally understand why you do this job. It's not about the excitement or the danger or the secrecy. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. We reached the access point to the computer center, and I could hear voices on the other side of the wall, the terrorists working to transfer $2.3 trillion to foreign accounts. You ready? I asked David. No. But let's do it anyway. The computer center was a maze of servers, cables, and blinking lights. 3 terrorists were working at terminals, their fingers flying over keyboards as they navigated through layers of financial security protocols. David and I watched from behind a server rack, waiting for the right moment to move. Can you tell what they're doing? David whispered. I studied the screens visible from our position. They're about halfway through the transfer process. Maybe 45 minutes of work left. Can you stop it? If I can get to a terminal, yes. But I need them distracted. That's when Martinez's distraction kicked in. Alarms began wailing throughout the building, and we could hear shouting from the floors above us. What's happening? One of the terrorists asked. Federal agents are trying to breach the main entrance, another replied. Should we abort? No. We're too close. 15 more minutes and the transfer will be irreversible. 15 minutes. That was longer than I'd hoped, but it was workable. I signaled to David, and we moved. The next few minutes were chaos. David tackled one of the terrorists while I engaged the other 2, using every combat technique I'd learned during my training. Federal agents weren't typically required to be physical combatants, but covert operations had taught me skills that most agents never needed. Within 5 minutes, all 3 terrorists were unconscious or restrained, and I was at a computer terminal. My fingers flying over the keyboard as I worked to reverse the money transfers. How bad is it? David asked, keeping watch at the door. Bad. They've already transferred about $800 billion. But I can trace the transactions and reverse most of them if I work fast enough. How fast? 10 minutes, maybe 15. That's when we heard footsteps in the corridor outside the computer center. Sarah, David said quietly, we have company. The door to the computer center exploded inward, and 6 heavily armed terrorists poured into the room. Step away from the computer, Director Phillips, the terrorist leader said, his weapon pointed directly at my head. I kept typing. Can't do that. Sorry. I said step away from the computer. And I said I can't do that. If I stop now, you'll have successfully stolen $800 billion from the American people. That's not happening on my watch. Then you'll die at that computer. Probably. But I'll die knowing that I stopped you from destroying my country's economy. The terrorist leader studied my face for a long moment. You don't care if you die. Do you? I care. But I care more about the mission. What mission? You're not military. You're not even officially acknowledged by your government. You're a ghost, Director Phillips. No one will remember you. No one will mourn you. No one will even know you existed. I looked up from the computer screen for the first time since I'd started working. You're wrong about that. How am I wrong? My family will remember me. My team will remember me. And every person whose life I've saved, every crisis I've prevented, every disaster I've stopped, they'll remember me, even if they don't know my name. I turned back to the computer and continued typing. Besides, I'm not done yet. Sarah, stop, David said quietly. Please. I looked at my brother, seeing the fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself, but fear for me. David, I need you to do something. For me. What? I need you to make sure Mom and Dad know that I love them. That everything I did was to make them proud. You can tell them yourself. Maybe. But just in case. The terrorist leader stepped closer, his weapon still trained on me. Director Phillips, you have 30 seconds to step away from that computer. Or what? You'll shoot me? I laughed, though there was no humor in it. If you shoot me, you'll never get access to these systems. The security protocols will lock everything down permanently. We'll find another way. No, you won't. Because there is no other way. These systems were designed specifically to prevent what you're trying to do. I could see doubt creeping into the terrorist leader's eyes. He'd planned this operation for months, possibly years, but he'd never encountered someone who simply refused to be intimidated. 10 seconds, he said. I kept typing. 5 seconds. I kept typing. Sarah, David said, and I could hear tears in his voice. I love you, too, little brother. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space of the computer center, but I didn't feel anything. I looked up from the computer screen to see the terrorist leader